All right. Well, the last time that we covered this story, the Pfizer story on this show, YouTube blocked us and told us that it was medical misinformation. Those were their words. The data that we were reporting on came directly from Pfizer's very own documents released for everyone to read. You could go and read them, including your family. Your little kids could read them if they wanted to. It would put them right to sleep. They were published, in fact, on the CDC's very own website. Thanks to a court order and because of the Freedom of Information Act request, we are now receiving regular document dumps from Pfizer. We should look forward to this, right? Because now we're getting some pretty detailed and startling information. In fact, 1 week from now, the third Pfizer data drop will occur. In March, we had 10,000 pages released. In April, we had 11,000 pages released. And guess what, guys? The big one coming up, 80,000 pages. So get out your favorite cocktail, get out your reading glasses. It's going to be a big one. But guess what? Before the next big document dump happens, we just received something huge in the past few days, perhaps even more important than all of the documents they've released so far. You see, Pfizer just released their annual report to the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm going to pull this up here. This is the SEC filing from the Securities and Exchange Commission. You see, Pfizer just released their annual report to the SEC on the efficacy of its current mRNA vaccines and its ability to make money off of COVID. They have to basically tell shareholders like, hey, we're either going to be profitable or we're not, so you need to make a decision whether or not to invest or not invest in us, this company, okay? But I want to draw your attention to scrolling down to page 6 of this document. It's not too far down, it's not buried terribly deep, but if you do scroll down to page 6 and 7, you'll notice a section called Risk Factors. And at the top of the risk factors section has this quote, our revenue depends heavily on the sales of our COVID vaccines, right? And our future revenues from our COVID-19 vaccines are uncertain. Then we skip down to the third paragraph, okay? If we just go down to the third paragraph here, and I'll leave it up to you to decide which of these paragraphs is more troubling. We may not be able to demonstrate sufficient efficacy, I'm quoting now, we may not be able to demonstrate the sufficient efficacy or safety of our COVID-19 vaccine and or our variant-specific formulations to obtain regulatory approval in the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, and other countries where it has been authorized for emergency use or granted conditional marketing approval. Let that soak in for just a second, okay? Just let that sink in. Let that flow over you. Pfizer is admitting in their own documents to the SEC that due to safety concerns and the efficacy sufficiency of their vaccines, they are not likely to gain regulatory approval for their vaccines.
Okay.
So in essence, continuing, please to use, just go on. Don't actually approve us. Just use the emergency authorization protocol, which of course you've been using throughout all of the pandemic, which does not rise to the level of scrutiny required for regulatory approval. So what could these concerns be? Could it have anything to do with the data that we covered here a few weeks ago, which got us banned on YouTube and blocked? Not on Rumble, though. We're still cranking nicely on Rumble, so thank you to those.
We're always ready to rumble.
We're always ready to rumble. Could it be that data? Pfizer's very own data that was released and available on the CDC's website? The things that are blocked on YouTube and you're not allowed to share them? Could it be the deaths associated with said vaccine? Probably not. I'm just being cynical, right? It probably has nothing to do with the efficacy there at all. Actually, Pfizer, once again in these documents to the SEC, talks about the adverse effects of their vaccines. If we scroll down to the page below, they talk about the adverse effects. Significant adverse events may occur during our clinical trials or even after receiving regulatory approval, which could delay or terminate clinical trials, delay or prevent regulatory approval or market acceptance of any of our product candidates, end quote. So in essence, these few paragraphs, Pfizer is admitting to basically that the emperor has no clothes in all of this. And what's remarkable is that all of these major pharmaceutical companies are shielded by the governments that deployed these emergency vaccines. You see, in order for these governments around the world to use these medicines, they had to agree to indemnify the companies against legal prosecution. The United States government, European countries, Canada, and others went along with it. Do you know why these vaccines are not available in India? Because the Indian government said, no, you're not going to be protected and shielded from prosecution if something goes wrong. So guess what? They're not available in India.
Is that true?
That's true. Yesterday in Canada, the president of AstraZeneca was pressed on exactly this question about indemnification. Watch this remarkable moment unfold in Canada, the president of AstraZeneca in Canada.
This question for both witnesses. We'll start with Ms. Coombs. A previous witness has told us that the global distribution of vaccine is subject to indemnification clauses that countries have to sign on to, meaning that if something goes wrong, your companies are shielded from liability. People cannot sue if they experience or perceive they have experienced vaccine injuries. Instead, any compensation would be paid out by a no-fault mechanism funded by COVAX, to which industry does not contribute. This witness further told us that you had asked for this protection as part of your agreements. So could you please explain why your company asked for indemnification clauses, why public bodies should assume those liabilities, and whether these indemnification clauses would apply in cases where information had been withheld by your company with respect to risks?
So I'm not privileged as to specifically the indemnification clause in the contract that you speak of. What I can say is that AstraZeneca stands behind our medicines and the safety profile of our medicines. And so,
ma'am, sorry to jump in, but you're the Canadian president of the company here, and you're telling me you're not aware of the details of the indemnification clauses. We're told that you asked for them. So why did you ask for them?
I asked for the indemnification clause on the Vaxzevria contract with Canada. So I'm clear.
We were told by a previous witness who's affiliated with Gavi that industry representatives asked for indemnification clauses as part of contracts for the global distribution of vaccines. Why?
I think that indemnification clauses in all of my time in the pharmaceutical industry is standard part of contracting. The specific details in which you talk about, I just am not I don't have the knowledge to answer.
Enough at all, but I wonder if Mr. Paquette can come in on that.
Yeah, so you're the president of the company. Why would you know anything about these indemnification clauses in there? And to his point about asking the question as to, well, if your company withheld information about the efficacy and safety of these vaccines, how can you still then be indemnified? Don't ask these questions. So no matter the adverse effects, it wouldn't matter because you can't sue them anyway. But here's the amazing part of the story, if that wasn't already enough. Investors who buy stock in these companies could sue them if they didn't disclose this information in their filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Isn't that funny? That's why we're learning about this.
Wait. Investors can sue.
Oh, yeah. So you can actually, investors, if they didn't disclose this in their SEC filings, right, why they're not profitable or the problems with their vaccine, therefore leading to lower revenue as an investor, you could sue them as an investor. But if you have adverse effects because of their vaccine.
But you as a person whose body reacted badly could not.
You could not because the indemnification clauses that they sign with these governments. But good thing that Wall Street is protected and investors are protected. Again, let that sink in for a moment. Big Pharma hides this information from the American people and the rest of the world, but they openly release this information to investors. Now, beyond the adverse effects and all of the problems associated with these drugs, I want to go ahead to page 7, which has perhaps the most startling paragraph of all. And I'm going to pull it up here. This is page 7 of the Pfizer SEC filings. And it says this: even if we obtain full regulatory approval for our COVID-19 vaccine and product candidates, the products may not gain the market acceptance among physicians, doctors, patients, and hospitals, cancer treatment centers, and others in the medical community necessary for commercial success.
I don't understand.
Here, I'll explain it. So what if those pesky doctors get in the way, right? So what they're saying is, even if we do get regulatory approval, well, we might have problems because they might not gain the market acceptance among doctors, patients, hospitals, or cancer treatment centers in the medical community.
But this document was only just published for the SEC, and Pfizer has had widespread approval from doctors. So they're saying if they continue through their full trials, that doctors won't like the data they see.
Yes. Well, if they actually had access to the data. The point is, of course, that many doctors have been silenced, right? Many doctors who have spoken out against the efficacy have lost their jobs. We've reported those stories here on this show. So what if those pesky doctors get in the way? You know, those people that spend 13 years in advanced education studying how the human body reacts to pathogens and medicines?
Or if they actually get the data that they need to make a fair assessment, which they have not.
Right. Well, if they had access to that data, how can we get rid of these people? How can we get these people out of the way and so that we can have commercial success? Where can we find politicians who would be willing to do our bidding? Where could we find politicians willing to kneecap doctors? California.
Of course, it's
California. California Democrats are looking to do just that. Here's the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Well, California Democrats are looking to do just that. And I know this sounds like it's fake or made up news, but no. This is the Wall Street Journal, and this is a real bill. Headline: California's medical misinformation crusade could cost lives, as with COVID treatment. Democratic lawmakers in California have proposed a new bill, a new piece of legislation that would require the state medical board to take action against doctors found to be spreading misinformation related to the nature and the risks of the virus, its prevention and treatment, and the development and safety and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. So, put another way, doctors in California who notice problems or adverse effects could lose their medical licenses for speaking up about these vaccines.
They'll be essentially deplatformed.
Yes, and they have been.
Right.
And we already have doctors who have lost their jobs and were told to go pound sand because of their stance on this. So they're deplatformed. They're deplatformed from their hospital. Mm-hmm. But I just want to read a section of this bill. I'm going to put this up here on the screen. It's 3 paragraphs, but I think it's really important for us to read. This is from the Wall Street Journal about this bill in California. And I want to read a section about what this anti-doctor bill would do according to the Wall Street Journal. Quote, the legislation would require the state medical board to take action against doctors found to be spreading, quote, misinformation related to the nature and risks of the virus, its prevention and treatment, and the development, safety, and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. So what is this misinformation? It's not clearly defined, but the bill would instruct the board to consider whether a doctor's order or opinion deviates from the standard of care, i.e. recommendations by the government, or treatments that are widely used by healthcare practitioners, and is contradicted by contemporary scientific consensus. 3rd paragraph. So doctors who prescribe or recommend treatments that haven't been approved by the Food and Drug Administration for COVID-19, for example, the antidepressant fluvoxamine, which has been shown strong results in trials, could be disciplined and even lose their medical licenses, no matter if they have scientific evidence to support them. Same for doctors who disagree with masking and, of course, vaccines for children. So these documents that Pfizer tried to keep hidden are showing troubling data. They're admitting that sales are down and their medicine is probably not good enough to pass regulatory muster. And even if it does get approved, they might receive big pushback from the medical community. And California is working to pass a bill that would punish doctors for using science and their expertise. That, my friends, is incredibly troubling. And this is, again, the data continues to come out quietly, hidden in these documents. And thank God, I mean, we actually have investors who invest in these companies. We can actually get honest information from Wall Street SEC filings, but we have to wait for these 80,000 pages to get even like little nuggets of information from the court filings.
You know, it's interesting. In the chat, Lisa Pettit, I think, asked, what are we considered efficacy, right? And originally we thought it meant it would stop the spread of COVID. That's no longer the common refrain is that we take the vaccine in order to mitigate the reaction in your own body to the virus, right? To keep you out of the hospital. But recent videos by Dr. John Campbell on this very platform, YouTube, have shown that the antibodies from the vaccine dip after a certain number of weeks, leaving you completely unprotected after a certain amount of time, no matter how many boosters you have. But naturally being infected with the vaccine, with COVID, which I think they're saying now 70 to 80% of the UK has, is leading to a natural level of immunity that we don't need to continue to depend on these. But it does show that immunity does dip after a certain exposure. So that's what we're considering efficacy. So he's comfortable saying efficacy dips, right? Although you are protected in the first couple of weeks, months. I mean, it really varies to your after the vaccine. And so what they're saying here is very leading when they use the word efficacy, because they say we're not sure about it. So that's interesting.
I've also had interesting friends who are traders and said they've like taken bets right now on Pfizer's stock price. And one of them said they bet another one of their traders that by the end of the year, by the end of 2022, they will in fact see a halving of their price. Their stock will be cut in half in value. And I have to, wonder if that's going to happen because there's a number of concerns. I mean, you actually had this week, within the past 72 hours, Pfizer and Moderna, their CEFOs have stepped down.
Yes.
Within 1 week of each, within.
Well, the way this was presented in the Wall Street Journal is that both companies needed new expertise CFOs because they had what they called a wind flow of cash, that they had so much money from the U.S. government. And in fact, there were reports just this morning that the U.S. government continues to buy up vaccines that are going to waste because they still have this requirement for extreme refrigeration. And there is not the same level of demand that we had at this time last year. So the United States government continues to stockpile and buy them up. So the stock prices seem to be doing just fine right now. But who knows if we're floating on a bubble here.
Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website, to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.